Hey everybody, this is @now_world_order, and this is going to be a response video to a video that Truthslayer just put out titled WWE Network News, What's Wrong with the Network? And I'm pretty much making this video right after watching his video, and I think he brought up a lot of good points, which I agreed with a lot of what he said. So I just made a couple notes as I was watching the video and decided to make this myself. So I'm going to start off pretty much with the stuff that I like about the network, then I'll get into the things that I dislike or think they could do differently. So stuff that I like. I think $10 a month is more than a fair price for the content you're getting. Now they're missing a lot of content, which I'll get into later. But for $10 a month, that's a pretty good... If you're a hardcore wrestling fan like myself and like most people who are going to watch this video, $10 a month is a damn good price, especially because they're including every pay-per-view for $10. Now, I was the kind of person that I would still order pay-per-view fairly consistently at like the $55 it was, but I, especially now after paying $10 and just knowing that some of the shows, it's hard to get behind a lot of the WWE pay-per-views. Like, there's always going to be the big four, and then every now and then something will spark some interest. But now it'd be really tough for me to pay more than $10 a month now that I've been doing it with the network for the last 5 months or so. So that being said, all those pay-per-views for $10 a month, I think that's a phenomenal deal. Another thing, it's a small thing, but seeing Chris Benoit is interesting at the very least. Seeing him on WWE television and hearing them use his name and all those good things, it's great to see him. I don't know what the right word is, because he's like been completely written out of professional wrestling history in the WWE's mind, at least. And for people like myself, for people who don't know, I'm 26 years old and I've been watching professional wrestling on a weekly basis since 1994. So I didn't do the math on it, but I was very young when I started watching it. And Chris Benoit was a guy that I followed from ECW to WCW to the WWE. So but at the same time, it's also weird. It's kind of eerie to see it, because knowing what he did, without getting into it, everyone knows who's watching this, I'm sure. It's kind of hard to watch at the same time. Like, I'm glad that they show it, but it's really weird. You guys know what I mean. I like the idea of them doing $60 all up front for the 6 months. That's what I'll be doing next, because then I just pay $60 out of one of my paychecks and don't have to think about it for 6 months. Don't have to make sure it's coming out of my debit or keeping an eye on it or anything like that. Just $60, don't have to think about it for 6 months. I love the idea of having the wrestlers' podcasts, like a wrestling roundtable, like what Truthslayer said. I listen to Steve Austin's podcast, Chris Jericho's podcast, JR's podcast, Goldberg's podcast, Rowdy Piper's podcast. I catch Colt Cabana's as well, but I doubt they would have him on the network since he's not affiliated with the company, at least not right now. But if they could do any sort of show like that, maybe similar to how Ariel Helwani does the MMA Hour, where it's video footage, and if the guests aren't there in studio, then he gets them on Skype. And there could be conflict with that, because they'd have a lot of people that weren't current WWE employees, and maybe people who didn't have a whole lot of nice things to say in general about the WWE. So that's one downside to doing something like that, is that they're going to probably water it down to make you talk about the things they want to talk about and leave really big chunks of important information out to help their own brand. I like the pre-shows and the post-shows that they do on the network. It's just extra content, before and after big shows. If you're still sitting around, got nothing to do, you got a little more wrestling to watch and that kind of stuff, I really like the WrestleMania Rewind series. I think it's a really cool idea that they take one or two matches, they highlight a specific superstar, and they talk in depth about, some really big WrestleMania matches and some big WrestleMania moments. So I really like that series. and it's easy access to documentaries, and you know there's going to be more to come. I think they tried to slow build the network. I think they were expecting it to be more successful than it was right off the bat. So their initial plan, I think, was to just kind of trickle content in there slowly, so that you're watching the live stream of the network, more often, trying to catch these things as they're coming out. I think that's going to change, though. I think they're going to release a lot more content and documentaries very soon because the numbers aren't where they were expecting them to be. And to Truthslayer's point, it's probably pretty comparable what's on Netflix in comparison to the WWE Network. I have both services. Netflix doesn't keep theirs up there as long, usually. I still think the WWE Network has the better documentaries, and there's some that are on both, but that's just, that's really just nitpicking. I mean, Netflix, if you have Netflix, you're not really getting Netflix to watch wrestling documentaries. If you get the WWE Network, you are getting it to get wrestling content. So those were just some things off the top of my head that I really liked about the network, for the most part. And then here's some stuff that I would like to see different or changed or, get rid of altogether, So when I got the network, I initially thought a big selling point to me was this whole concept of the Monday Night Wars. Anyone like me that grew up in the 90s, for me, the NWO was my life. Sting was my life. I lived in Atlanta, Georgia. WCW was my life. I was, of course, a fan of the WWF at the time as well. And, later on, guys like Shawn Michaels and Steve Austin and, obviously, Chris Jericho, all those guys just, blew me away. And WWE is where it is today because they were the smarter brand, and they were taking, instead of WCW taking all the top talent from WWF out of their prime, WCW was just basically just stealing all the potential right under WCW, and look where they are now. That's a whole other thing for many other videos. But my point is, the Monday Night Wars were huge. And when I got the network, my initial thought was that they were going to have like an ongoing series about the Monday Night Wars. Like not just like a documentary or just a couple, specials. Like it was going to be like a series of like this night versus this night. Like you just pick a random night in 1997 on a Monday and show what was going on Raw, what was going on Nitro, and have people who were involved in both companies talk about their experiences if they can remember, those nights. I think that's a really good idea for the network, and it might be coming soon. They might already have this idea. I'm sure that they would have to. No one knows why they're missing so much of the content that they could have on there. I would love to see stuff like Velocity, Sunday Night Heat, WCW Saturday Night, Thunder, all those old shows that were on like at weird times of the week or really late at night, or Sunday Night Heat was always a great lead-in to the pay-per-views, or even halftime heat during the Super Bowl that one year. I think it was just 1 year. They might have done it more. I can't remember, but they should put those on the network. The streaming differences between platforms. So I've used it on Xbox 360, an Xbox One, an iPhone, my computer, Apple TV, PlayStation 3, and it's weird because they all operate differently. Like, my biggest gripe with the Xbox One is that almost everything I do on my Xbox One I can say out loud. It has voice recognition, but I cannot figure out a way. Like, I can get the WWE Network to pop up on my screen by voice, but then I can't select any content with my voice, which is a small thing, but when I don't have my controller around me and I'm used to just talking to my television at this point, it just becomes annoying, I guess. First world problems, there you go. Some of the devices, like I noticed on PlayStation, there's a button you can hit where it knows where each match is starting and stopping, so you just hit one button, whereas on most of my other devices, I have to just fast forward, along the bottom and just kind of hope I pick where I'm looking for. So that's just another thing. I I've had streaming issues with my Xbox One, my Xbox 360, and my Apple TV, but that's just going to happen with any new technology. I understand that. I do believe, though, it runs the best off of my Xbox One and my 360. That's pretty similar, and my Apple TV doesn't. The picture isn't quite as good, so I will say that from my own personal experiences with those. One thing I'd like to see is it doesn't pick up where you left off in a show or like in a documentary or an episode of anything, like on Netflix. Like if I was watching Breaking Bad on Netflix and I'm in season 4, episode 4, 30 minutes in, when I turn off my Netflix and come back to it, whenever I come back to it, I just hit a couple buttons and it knows where I left off. Whereas the WWE Network, if something happens, let's say I'm watching a Royal Rumble on the network, and I am 45 minutes into the Royal Rumble match, and my streaming connection goes away and the network restarts or whatever, I have to just guess. Like I said, I can't just go match by match, and then I have to just guess. Like, okay, I was maybe 45 minutes into this match, and hope I didn't go too far or too short. And, it's just something that I'm sure they will have to fix at some point, because it's way too common nowadays with stuff like Netflix. And HBO Go is the same kind of way for anyone who's used that service as well. So one of my favorite concepts for the network is the WWE Countdown show, but I hate all of their lists. Like, not necessarily the topics, but the order in which these fans are choosing who is, number 10 through 1 is like, it's hard to watch, because let me put it this way, like, the idea of WWE Countdown is a good idea, because it's like a top 10 countdown show, which is always going to be, I think, I don't know what the right word is. It's something that people are interested in. Everyone likes, countdowns and rankings, and like you look at the UFC, they have top 10, top 15 rankings, But I believe these are fan voted. At least that's how they market this show. And if any fan can go on there and vote however they want to for these polls, for these lists, these countdowns, there needs to be some sort of like pro wrestling history test or something that you should have to go through before you are allowed to vote on this stuff. Because, just off the top of my head, like, they had some about like romantic couples in the WWE or something like that, and Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth were like number 3, and you're like, anyone who knows wrestling history, like, they're number 1, and if they're not, Triple H and Stephanie or whatever, I don't even remember who won the thing, but I was just like completely turned off when it wasn't Miss Elizabeth and Randy Savage. Maybe I'm biased because I've been watching it long enough, I don't know. But then there was even like the top factions in wrestling history, and the Brood got like number 2. Like, they beat out the NWO, and it was like, the Brood wasn't around that long. It was 3 guys, and no one really did anything. Later on, Edge and Christian, and then mainly Edge, had terrific careers, but the stable itself, yeah, they had cool entrance music and the fire. I was very into it when I was a teenager, don't get me wrong, but there were groups on that list that, and like the Four Horsemen and stuff, like, there were teams on that list that like were way better for way longer than the Brood. So it's just either uneducated fans or fans that just really don't understand what they're voting on, or haven't seen this content before, and they're just going on what they remember from when they were younger. I agree with Truthslayer on, it's weird that there's no WWE films on there. I feel like that's going to change, but to be completely honest, I don't watch any of those anyways, because all the movies look really corny to me, especially the ones with John Cena blowing up like 20 times per movie and surviving it all, like, which, once again, I haven't seen it, but from the looks of it, that's what it looks like a lot of those movies are. I have no interest in watching the Marine 4 or whatever. A couple ideas that I had, and I'll also say I'll agree with Truthslayer on this. It does irk me that there is no set schedule for the shows. Like, it's like sometimes you'll get the same thing at the same time each week, sometimes you won't. I would like to see a set weekly schedule as well on the network. And these are just some ideas that I had. I don't know if they're possible, but I think that they might be interesting. So what if there was a live Twitter feed? There's all these boxes and channels and things you can go in within the network. What if there was one you click that was just a Twitter feed? And it was just anything with the hashtag or a mention from the WWE or whatever. Just an ongoing conversation, just like a giant message board right up there that you can watch, like a sports ticker. I know they do that during their episodes, but they only pick a few and they filter them. If you could do that like unedited or edited, you could figure out a way around it. I think that'd be interesting. Or a YouTube channel where videos like this can be broadcasted right on the network if you decide to watch it. You just reply to a WWF or WWE video on YouTube or something like that, and they screen it to make sure that it doesn't have anything crazy in it, and fans can actually get their ideas out there and communicate like this on a much, much bigger scale. And one other idea that I had that I thought would be really cool is nowadays people really love live streaming video games. Like there's game DVR and there's ways that people can watch me play my Xbox One if I want them to. People are always streaming computer games and that kind of stuff. What if there was a live ongoing 24-hour stream that you can pick from of people playing the WWE 2K games, like the online game, but have it streaming on you click a button on the network and you can choose from a bunch of people playing each other and you can watch them having their matches on the WWE network. I think that's a really cool idea personally. And the last thing I'm going to say is for anyone who's a fan of professional wrestling and anyone who's a fan of mixed martial arts, mainly the UFC Fight Pass, I have that as well, and it's very similar. It does not include the pay-per-views, so WWE is definitely winning there. But with UFC Fight Pass, something that they're doing is they're starting to include other organizations. Like, the WWE is doing similar things, like they're showing World Class Championship Wrestling and ECW and blah, 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 companies that they own the libraries to. But UFC Fight Pass is going to start airing stuff like kickboxing tournaments, amateur wrestling tournaments, jiu-jitsu tournaments, judo. There's a company called Invicta that the UFC doesn't even own that is going to be showing all women's MMA on Fight Pass. So maybe WWF, or I keep calling them WWF, maybe WWE can do something about that. It's kind of similar to what Fight Pass does. And maybe there's some smaller organizations out there, like a Ring of Honor or a Chikara or a New Japan Pro Wrestling or Pro Wrestling Noah, or just something that maybe WWE throws them a bone, and those people get to put their product on the WWE network, and the fans pay $10 a month for it. I think you'd get a lot of hardcore fans that way, and everyone would win. WWE, it's no sweat off their back. These companies are never in a million years going to catch what they cannot beat. No one can beat the machine that the WWE has become at this point, as far as professional wrestling goes. I'm sure they'll buy the TNA library whenever they go out of business, because it's inevitable. And, why not let other companies get exposure? Like look at what it did to NXT. I mean, they can do something very similar to what they did with NXT, but obviously WWE owns NXT. So, let me know what y'all think. And I hope you watch this Truthslayer. I've been watching your videos since you started them, probably. I mean, this was back when it was you and Bill and Doug and Crazy Mike and Dirty White Boy and Mark Pearson and all those guys. I've always watched y'all's videos, and I've always wanted to do them myself, but it's never kind of took the time to. Started doing them recently. So, if you want to subscribe to my channel, I'm going to do a lot more of these videos. And, thanks for keeping doing them. Like fans like me, it's hard to come across people who are into it for as long and, are as smart to the business as guys like you are and, like others are. And this is a good forum to express opinions. So I'm glad you're trying to get some discussion on this, and I hope other people comment and make videos too. So for anyone who doesn't already, or anyone who's interested, my YouTube channel is at now_world_order. It is at NOW_WORLD_ORDER. You can also find me on Twitter at now_world_order, just like the YouTube channel. I have almost 11,000 Twitter followers now, which is phenomenal, and I'm creeping up on close to 30 YouTube subscribers. So I will talk to y'all later. Take it easy. Have a good one, and thank you, Truthslayer.